back to the Dueling Banjos podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Coen Brothers film Inside Llewyn Davis, starring Oscar Isaac, Carey Mulligan, a handful of others, all-star cast. And my take on the movie is that it's an interesting examination of an artist who both is egotistical, but does retain some humility in a broader sense. And the film follows his attempts to be perceived as a great artist by others in the same way that he is perceiving himself as a great artist. And his struggles to achieve that.
Yeah, I mean, the central question of the movie is why does the artist fail? The difficulty for anyone who wants to be a great artist is that they have to suppress common intimacy. And so the whole movie shows Llewyn Davis fighting the struggle to regard himself as a great artist and to suppress or to purge himself of the common intimacies of life. So the relation with parents, the relation with romantic partners, the relation with friends, because the great artist needs that purgation in order to be able to create a new form of intimacy.
But he's already rejected the intimacy in his life. I mean, very callous.
That's what I'm saying you have to do. The difference between a great artist
and
a
common he hasn't accepted.
No, I'm saying he's attempting to go through the hard path of greatness in the arts. So greatness in anything requires, it's sort of you only feel resonance or intimacy on the human level in general terms. So the prophet is intimate only with believers. The statesman is intimate only with his people. And the artist is intimate only with his audience. And when you're a great artist, you're always creating an audience because you're creating a new form of resonance between yourself and others that those people are not yet aware of, that it's your duty as the artist to bring out and to show them. And so Llewyn Davis, he's a folk singer, so you might say he's resurrecting a forgotten resonance. But the point is he thinks he has a higher meaning that he sees as far as the intimate connection with people. And so what that requires is that he purges himself of the common intimacies that you see in Jim and Jean, Troy Nelson. These are common artists. They're not great artists.
Well, you're beginning to define Llewyn Davis as a great artist, which I don't know I necessarily...
No, I'm saying he seeks to be one.
Well, but I mean, you have to be careful with the words you choose, because you said create a resonance, and creation implies intent. Whereas I think to be a great artist, there's a certain degree of apathy you have to have towards your audience. So you don't aspire to create a resonance, you aspire to create something meaningful to you and hope that in doing so, other people will find the meaning in it, but you retain an apathy towards whether they do or not. So an artist makes something in their image and their idea of what is artistic in their artistic voice, and they hope that others will engage with that. But if they don't, they have to be comfortable with that.
But that's because you're not making... So what's the point of that Kennedy song that they have? He shows up at the studio, they sing that it's a popular song, it's implied that it's going to do very well. That's a form of common art. That's looking at the audience that exists and saying, this is what they want to hear. This is what they want to consume. It's essentially consumptive. The great artist does not do that because he holds himself to a higher standard. He says, I am making art for an audience that doesn't exist yet because they don't know that the form of resonance that I'm presenting to the world is resonant to them. I have to teach them.
No, I don't think the great artist cares about an audience.
Well, any artist cares about an audience. It's a question of whether your audience is there or whether the audience needs to be.
No, I don't think they do, because you see the greatest artists of all time double down on their individual style, whether it was
right, because they thought they had a resonance that the people of the time did not know. You have to teach them,
but then the
value of what you're doing.
They didn't make it for an audience then.
Well, they made it for
expression of their own.
The audience was anticipated. It was anticipated in the mind of the artist.
No, I don't think it was. I think they made something that was an expression of their insight and thinking and intellect on certain things. And it was an engagement on behalf of the audience to say, this is a work of art for me, not the artist to say, this is a work of art for you. You just don't know it yet. It's on the audience and the intent of the audience to say, oh, I like this, or I don't. I mean, the Coen Brothers themselves have their own unique style that is for some people and not for others, but they double down on it. It's up to us, the audience, to say, I like this or I don't like this. I'm resonating with this or I'm not. It's not up to the Coen Brothers to say, one day you will like this or you should like this.
Well, if you make something that nobody likes and nobody cares about and nobody remembers, are you an artist at all then? You can't say that the artist does what he does only for himself. If the artist appears to not getting reception from an audience that he seeks, it's because he is anticipating a kind of audience that doesn't exist yet. That's what he's doing. But you still need an audience. If you were sitting on an island painting, you're not an artist because you don't have an audience.
I think you are. Because what you're talking about is I mean, were some of these great artists not artists when they were making things, but became artists once their work was recognized?
No, because art is a communication. It's a creation of a new form of intimacy between the creator and those who respond to what is created.
Right.
So that requires respond. It's a reciprocal thing. It's a reciprocal thing. You can't say, if you say there's such a thing as an artist who creates only for himself. He doesn't need any. It's not. No one needs to see it. No one needs to respond to it. And I'm saying that's not possible. An artist, by definition, is a reciprocal task. It's when you create art, it's a reciprocal thing. You are either appealing to an existing audience or you're attempting to anticipate an audience of the future that doesn't know that this will be resonant for it.
I don't think that that's true, and I don't think that that's what Llewyn Davis does either. I think Llewyn Davis sings and performs and presumably writes some of the songs, but he does covers, of classic folk tunes throughout it. But whatever, he's creating what he deems to be art individually and working towards success, making the art that he wants to make, but is not changing anything based off it not finding an audience.
Right, because he holds himself out as a potentially great artist who is anticipating the kind of future audience that doesn't exist
yet.
But
then shouldn't there be a complacency in his struggle? Which there doesn't seem to be.
No, because So if you take the path of I'm a great artist, it's a very difficult thing to do, because what you're doing is you're saying I have insight into a future type of resonance that the people don't yet understand. You have to hold yourself out from the temptation to, uh, you know, surrender to the consumptive needs of the audience that you see. That's what he does, and it's a very difficult thing, and that extends into your life, where you have to hold yourself from the common intimacy of getting married and having kids and all this, because your devotion to seeing an audience and a type of resonance that doesn't exist yet is total. And so sometimes you throw yourself off the George Washington Bridge like Mikey did, because the difficulty of a great artist who holds himself out for greatness and who thinks he sees uh, a future resonance that the people don't yet see is a very difficult path. And so that's what Llewyn Davis is. He clearly wants an audience.
Well, it's a difficult path, but presumably the great artist is also self-aware that the path will be difficult. And so there's a complacency, or at least some sort of contentedness in the struggle, or you wouldn't be pursuing it. Right? If you come in, if you make art with the expectation that you have an audience, then the struggle, you can't be content with the struggle, because you presumably a motivation is to make something for an audience. So that'd be like if he made songs like Please Mr. Kennedy and they weren't successful. He's making something, sort of debasing the art to a more simplistic audience, not finding it. You wouldn't be content there. You presumably would be content making your art, not finding an audience, but hoping that you do. And that to me is the great artist, is saying, I know it's going to be a struggle for me to make my sort of specific brand of art and find success doing it, but I'm comfortable with that struggle and with that obstacle, because I'm making what I believe to be great art. And the motivation is the art, not the audience, for the great artist. And so they're comfortable with the struggle. Now, it might play into what you're saying in that artist, the one that's comfortable with the struggle, is the one that has sacrificed all of the things that you're talking about. And Llewyn Davis is struggling to fully sacrifice those things. Maybe there's a case to be made there, but it seems to me that he has largely removed himself emotionally from all of the personal relationships he could have fostered in a healthy way. The one with whoever he hooked up with and had the kid with, right? The Jim and Diane, Jim and Jean, Mikey himself, it seems to me he has some sort of, I don't know, disdain for the embrace of having a partner. And so,
yeah, but you're underrating the difficulty of electing yourself to greatness. This you can apply this to any capacity, but in the capacity of the artist, what you have to do is you have to say, I will not be common in my life. I will not seek the common intimacy that normal people have. You hold yourself out from that, and it's very difficult. And that's why artists suffer. It's why Mikey jumped off the bridge. It's because when you elect yourself to this kind of greatness, it requires putting yourself back from the common types of life and the common bids for intimacy that normal people do. And so it's a difficult thing, because you talk about his egotism. The egotism is a necessary defense of the artist against the fact that he's withheld himself from common intimacy. He has to take on the grandeur, even if no one else sees it, and it's certainly not evident in his life. He has to take on the grandeur in order to be able to sustain the difficulty of withholding yourself from those things.
All right, so I don't think you've addressed my point, which is the contentedness in the struggle.
Well, you're content because you're content insofar as you feel like you have an insight into a future resonance for people. That's That's what the artist does.
Well,
And so if it's a constant struggle because you have to go through all the callousness and the indifference, the self-doubt that comes from the fact that the present audience does not understand you. And so you doubt yourself whether do I really have a form of intimacy that is truly resonant, or am I the deluded one? Am I the one who just has a selfish arrogance that ultimately has no meaning? And so when you want to be a great artist, you have to believe, that's where your contentedness comes in. You have to believe against the facts, against the reality of rejection, that your greatness will become manifest at some point. And so as a lot of artists have been unknown during their lifetimes, right? And most of them have suffered for it.
But I would say most of them were content with the suffering. I don't think they needed validation in their lifetime or recognition in their lifetime to say, I'm making what I'm passionate about making. And I'm creating something I deem great. And so whether it gets recognized now or ever, I'm content in my life having made these things. Right? So, like, if you look at the greatest artists of any art form, we're talking about movies, so we'll just, like, take somebody like David Lynch, made Eraserhead, super low budget, started off as a college project, right? Now, if he continued to make Eraserhead for his whole career, Eraserhead type stuff for his whole career, without ever blowing up and getting budgets for things, I still think he would have been content in his art. I don't think inherent in him considering himself a great artist was him getting recognition. I think that's where we're disagreeing. And I don't think there needs to be an audience consensus for
we are disagreeing. The artist is not an island. I mean, to say that you can be an artist doing things solely for yourself. So I do this for my own satisfaction, and if no one else was in the world, I would be perfectly fine with it, and I'd do the same thing, and I'd be just as satisfied. That's insane. Art is communicative. It's creating a resonance which requires reception. It requires an audience.
Okay, but
there's no artist. There are artists who reject the audience they have in front of them, but there is no artist who rejects all considerations of an audience. They believe they have a future audience. They believe they have an audience that has not yet existed. So you can't say that someone like Lynch or Llewyn Davis in the movie is content to produce what he produces with no one else. I mean, what's the point of him trekking to Chicago for Grossman? You say, well, that's just financially motivated. No, it isn't. He wants it's partially, but he wants Grossman to find his work resonant, and he's disappointed when he doesn't.
Yeah, but I mean, then the point about the egotism goes away. Because if he went in there and Bud Grossman said, I don't see anything here, which is what happens, he wouldn't leave. He leaves defeated. He leaves like, I'm done with this, right? He comes back to Gene and he's like, I can't do it anymore. Or he comes back to his sister's place and says, I can't do it anymore. I'm done, You don't get defeated as a great artist if you are confident in your own work. Whether you're confident in the belief that it has an audience or you're just confident in your understanding that it is great, you don't leave defeated. That's always what drives you, is the greatness of the art. And so you don't need that validation. If it comes, great. Obviously you're not going to turn it down.
You're saying any artist who goes into despair or commits suicide or something, that you're saying that's evidence of artistic failure. It isn't. You're completely missing the difficulty of the project of, if you believe you're a great artist, you have to withhold yourself from the things that other people have and are able to get. That's what he's doing.
Okay. Well,
So that's not, no matter what, how much you believe in what you're doing and how much you love what you're doing, you have put yourself out of the normal, the common human interactions. And that is always very difficult. And it's doubly difficult when your art is not getting a positive reception. So your faith that there's an audience that will eventually come for you and will find your art resonant is constantly weighed against, I have elected to a life of suffering. I have rejected for myself the common things that other people attain. That's difficult.
okay. Well, one, I think we're talking about two things also. The difference between belief and knowledge that your work is great, right? If you believe your work is great, that implies still a sense of doubt. It's a belief. If you know your work is great, then you would never kill yourself as a result of it, because you know that you're making great work. You don't need the validation to sustain you. And so that it comes down to the definition, I guess, of what we're talking about is great art. And it seems like what you're playing into, or what you seem to be suggesting Llewyn Davis is playing into, is that art is entirely subjective. And if you treat it that way, if there is no objectivity in art, there's always going to be a shred of doubt that you're making art.
No, there could be objectivity.
What is that object?
You could have full confidence that I know I'm creating something great, and still be in despair because the greatness, it's not time for it. There are many artists that are fish out of water. They're artists of a time that cannot comprehend that. So the artist sees the value of the work he's producing. The artist sees it, has full confidence in it. That doesn't mean that his life isn't despairing, because the constant callousness of the people that you have to work with in your time is a extremely difficult mode of life. Because you can believe, well, my art will one day, I'll be famous one day, I'll be recognized one day. And that's not going to entirely mitigate the despair of the fact that the audience of the time rejects you. So it's not.
But the despair is not an artistic one. The despair is purely a tangible one.
Well, it's why the artist develops egotism. It's why it's why you would say Llewyn Davis is an unpleasant person. It's because that becomes a necessary defense against the pressures of the common life, which are for everybody. It doesn't matter if you have total confidence that I am a master and I am producing things that are highly resonant, and the people of some other time will one day find that out. Because the pressures of the common life beat on everyone, right? You despair, and your egotism is a partial defense, but not a complete defense against that despair of rejection in your time.
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think egotism can spawn from a certain rejection. That you're right, it is a defense mechanism against rejection, but there's a different form of egotism that I think the best artists have, which is not a response or defense against that rejection. It's just purely out of confidence in their own work, that it is great. Because I think there's for people who objectively define art and then make something within that objective definition, then they know they are making art, and they can look at culture and say, well, the modern zeitgeist, the modern culture doesn't recognize this objective art. So I just have to be content with my art not succeeding because they're elevating themselves above the culture.
You think that's so easy? It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but I think it's easy to
It's not
Not
easy.
losing.
It's not easy. You know, you'd be laying in the grave when your recognition comes. That's not easy.
Well, it's
Not easy
no,
for anyone.
it's not easy, but it goes against sort of what you were saying, which is that all of this is fueled by a defense against rejection.
Well, his personality that he takes on and the egotistical traits are a defense. Because if no one is recognizing your greatness, the only person that can do it is you.
Well, no,
The artist.
because the great artist in any position in their life, in any emotion, makes art. So when they're sad, they make art. When they're happy, they make art. When they're angry, they make art. And the art generally tends to manifest itself as, you know, what the mindset of the artist is at that time. So you can see angry pieces of art, and you can see sad pieces of art that reflect the mindset of the artist. It is their way of expression. And so for Llewyn Davis to be a great artist, what he would have had to have done after Bud Grossman rejected him is not what he does, which is surrender. It would have been, I need to go write another song. I need to go perform another song. And if it has to be performed at this dump, then so be it. That's where I'll perform it. But I need to go make something. They're motivated to create out of their struggle, not resigned to the struggle.
Yeah, we're having difficulty because I'm not saying the movie portrays Llewyn Davis as a great artist necessarily. I'm saying that the movie portrays Llewyn Davis as someone who's elected himself to greatness. That's a different thing. He may be wrong. It may be that his, the devotion to folk songs and maybe the fact that he doesn't write his own works will defeat him, and that the qualities of greatness which he believes he has are not actually there. He is not creating a new form of intimacy. He's not creating something highly resonant, even for a future audience. So he may be wrong. What I'm saying that the movie does is that it portrays a artist in Llewyn Davis who has elected himself. He believes it. And you say, well, he should just be confident that he has it, which I don't think anyone can have, even the highest masters. But the point is that that's a constant struggle then against the self-doubt of, am I truly great? But also if I am truly great, I must withhold myself from the common intimacies of life. And so it is a struggle. And you see towards the end of the movie, he makes some overtures to go back to the common life. I mean, we don't know what the situation with Jean will be, but he expresses emotions towards her in a way that he didn't before his trek to Chicago. He goes and he tries to get on the ship, do what his father did. These are bowing to the common realities of life that he.
Well, so is, in your mind, Llewyn Davis a great artist?
Probably, yeah.
Well, because you got done saying there needs to be a consent.
The implicit comparison being made, and it's made explicit at the end of the movies, with Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, slaved away, working gigs at bars, getting a lot of rejection, getting called a bad singer. And he weathered it because he said, I have a resonance that may not be known now, but will be known. And in his case, it came pretty soon in the context of the 60s. So he weathered it. He held from the common intimacies, and he said, I have a resonance that one day will be recognized, and it was recognized pretty soon in his lifetime, certainly. Now, the movie doesn't say whether Llewyn Davis had that or not. But what it does say is that Llewyn Davis believed for most of the movie that he had it. And you could argue that that belief is crumbling a bit towards the end, but I think he'll probably be the same. He's going through the struggle that all artists go through and all great artists go through of not finding your audience, not resonating with the existing people you have, and having to hold out that they will come. Okay. And the movie doesn't
You just
that,
called
that
Llewyn Davis a great artist.
I did not. I said that
you said you believe probably he is.
I probably, yeah.
Okay. So, but now you've just sort of undercut that by saying that, well, there needs to be a consensus. Bob Dylan had a consensus when an audience found him. So by the end of Inside Llewyn Davis, you can't say that he is a great artist.
Yeah, what I mean by consensus is not popularity or the extent of the popularity.
Audience, whatever, even if it's niche audience, there needs to be something. It seems to me your suggestion, because you've just laid out, well, Bob Dylan found it in his lifetime. What did he find? He found an audience in his lifetime. But would he have been a great artist if he didn't find it in his lifetime?
Well, there's an essential aspect about these things, which is that resonant art will be resonant, whether now or in the future.
Okay, and I'm saying, is it possible in your definition and in your framework to recognize a great artist in the moment before everybody else decides, oh, this person is great?
It's possible.
Okay, and what dictates that? How is that indicated? Unless there's an objective definition of art. If everything is subjective, you can't say, I'm deeming this person a great artist now.
There is an objective definition, but it can't be known before it manifests. That's a different point.
Yes, it can.
No, it can't.
Because we understand what the art forms are, and at least on a technical proficiency level, we understand what makes them skillful. But technical proficiency isn't in the entirety of what I would define as art. There needs to be something that the work is actually pursuing that's greater, right?
Right.
And so a film that's worth $5,000 could be better than a film that's worth $5 million if that $5,000 film is pursuing something greater than the $5 million film.
Yeah.
And so, but you can only recognize that as a better film if you have an objective definition of what that element is that it needs to be doing to push itself over the commercial aspect, the technical proficiency aspect into art. And I'm not sure you've identified exactly what that is.
Well, you're saying there's technical aspects of greatness, which there certainly are. You need to know, in the case of Llewyn Davis, you need to be able to play the guitar. You need to be able to sing. These are the technical things.
Yeah, I mean, in Dylan's case, right.
I don't understand that.
Right, the lyrics are right. Ultimately, what is the artistic aspect of his song is certainly not his voice.
Well, okay. So in Llewyn Davis's case, you could say he's retreading folk songs, and maybe that's the source of his ultimate failure, which is that he is not original enough to be said to be creating a new form of intimacy and of resonance, which is the standard of a great artist. You're creating a new form, or perhaps resurrecting something that was forgotten. That's what a great artist is. A common artist is somebody that looks at what the people in front of them want to consume and gives it to them. That's Jim, right? And Al. But the great artist says, I do not see my audience, but it is there because I have insight into human necessities and essential resonances. That's the great artist. Now, the great artist makes that bet, and to the extent that he's technically skilled and that he can compare with previous artists, he may know, well, I'm doing something quite great here. This is great stuff, just I can see it. But if nobody's responding to it, you still have the trepidation of being totally confident in that, which Bob Dylan certainly had. You say Bob Dylan was, I don't know what his mental state was when he was doing bar gigs, but everyone goes through that self-doubt. You can't say, I mean, he says, well, I'm writing great lyrics. I'm the voice of a generation. It's clear. I can read what I got. But before you get that resonance from others, you still have a lingering doubt about it.
No,
Yes.
I don't know that you do.
Yes, you do.
You have a lingering doubt about whether it'll be commercially successful. You don't have a lingering doubt about whether you've made something artistic.
Well, yes and no. You may be quite confident of your own merits for yourself, but all art is ultimately a plea for communication. It's not, you don't sit down and write a poem and say, man, I wrote a great poem here. I'm going to read it over and over again. It's awesome. At some point, you need to find it resonant for someone else. There has to be an audience that responds to the meaning that you are trying to give to the world. There has to be that.
Okay. But again, we come back to then you would have a contentedness with the idea that your work possibly won't be recognized until after you're gone. And that should instill as much contentment in you as if it is recognized in your lifetime.
Well, no, it shouldn't.
Yeah, it should.
No, it shouldn't.
If you're confident that at some point in the future, an audience will find your work valuable or artistic or resonant.
Yeah, most of the great artists were more miserable than not. I don't think that's because of a lack of confidence. It's because it's a hard life to say, I have something. I've painted a painting that in 100 years, when I'm in the grave, will sell for millions and people will exalt me. That's not easy.
Well,
because your life,
it's a Sisyphus type thing. You find meaning in the struggle. When you're presented with a struggle that is never ending, as Llewyn Davis is, I mean, he literally winds up at the end of the movie back where we first saw him.
right?
And so, you find meaning in the struggle. You ultimately find contentment in the struggle if you believe that it is worth something.
You find the will to endure it. That doesn't mean that you're not miserable. You keep using the word contentment. That's too strong a word. You
imagine Sisyphus happy.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, that's a philosophical point, but the realities of life are I got to spend my life in a state of having rejected by necessity the common intimacies, the common happiness that other people attain. I've held myself out from it. And I will never feel that in my lifetime because I'll die without recognition. And so, yes, you do have to have it has to sustain you, but it doesn't make you content. You're not content. You're miserable.
Well, and I'm not sure I entirely buy that point either, because you can only engage with certain subject matters in a higher intellectual way sometimes if you've experienced them. Shakespeare's sonnets were written presumably for a genuine love of someone else or care of someone else. Now, if he didn't actually feel that and engage with that intimacy, could he then write it in a believable and meaningful way?
No, because, well, the great artist always comprehends intimacy. That's a little different than feeling it. The comprehension of it, the ability to understand how others relate to each other while not totally feeling it yourself, that's the quality of the great artist. And so the purely subjective artist who says, I'm writing my feelings, that's a common artist. Saying, I am simply putting out what, has been meaningful to me in my life. That's a common thing. And that can be somewhat resonant in the present because other people feel it. But if you're holding yourself out as a great artist, you are anticipating a kind of intimacy and a kind of connection that is not apparent in the world. That's what you're doing. So it's not so simple as to say I, on an individual level, feel the sentiments that I'm expressing. It's that I have a comprehension of them for others. And that comprehension is the sort of distanced approach that a great artist has to maintain in order to be great.
Well, no, because I mean, the whole concept of like write what you know, presumably you write the most meaningful things that you have experienced. You're not presuming or adopting an experience that you haven't had, at least in a plausible, to be able to express it in a believable or plausible way. Right?
No.
I think so.
No, most of the worst art is always the most sincere.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, that's not
because a great artist is resonant, not only generally, but also in ways that people might not understand themselves. You are articulating something that has not been articulated. If you have a common experience of sadness and you write on the basis that you're sad, you have made something that is resonant to a degree in a common way because people feel sadness. That's a common artist. The great artist sees a emotional state like sadness in a way that has not been articulated. It's a comprehension of it more than an experience of it.
Okay, but to comprehend, you need to have experienced it.
Well, that may be true.
You know, it's like you can't create the color red if you've never seen the color red. I mean, you have to have experienced certain things in order to even to have a fundamental understanding of what they are, or the feeling of them. So I don't feel that somebody who's never experienced sadness could make a particularly sad movie. Or
which you're not getting. I'm trying to draw a distinction. There are plenty of people who write songs and write poems, and it's therapeutic, and they may get some people that think it's great, but it doesn't last. And I'm asking the question, why doesn't it last? It's because you have not created something novel. You have simply expressed a common experience of life that people can relate to, but there's nothing great about what you've done, because the great artist is someone who expresses a human state in a way that has not been done. And so common experiences that we all have are the source of common art. And that has its purpose.
Well, then I disagree that that certainly that the worst art is the most sincere. I don't think that's the case at all, because the most art of
but anything that's great leaps out of the context in which it was made. If you say this song is about my breakup, this song is about my loss, you are intentionally pigeonholing it in the context and the time and the person that made it. And you could say, well, we all feel that to some degree, so it's universally resonant or something. But it's not that simple. It's that you have contextualized what you have made and thus made it temporary. You haven't distanced yourself to the extent of comprehending human experience as a whole and across time and across different ages. That's the great artist. That requires a certain distance from all the sentiments you express in the art. They can't just be yours alone. If it's entirely yours.
Right. I mean, there are more universal things, but you can, I mean, you can write a sad song or make a sad movie and have it be with the same degree of artifice or a higher degree of artifice than someone else who may write a sad song or sad movie, because it's about the experience of consuming that art, how it makes you feel.
Yeah, but that experience has to be made universal on some level.
Right. The way it's the emotion itself is universal.
Well, right.
Okay. So, but in order to buy into the experience of that emotion that the work of art is presenting as an experience, the artist had to have truly felt something in order to understand the nuances of it. That's why for like fantasies in film, it's always like such a simplistic general idea of good versus evil. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, because to engage with something totally fantastical is always going to be very surface level. You cannot, and that's why actually the greatest, most long lasting art is the one that is the most human and human based, because you don't have that superficial understanding that comes in the form of a totally fantastical narrative.
We've been talking about the mindset of the artist, and you seem to be saying that the artist has to experience what he expresses, which is not even remotely true.
Not the specific experiences, but the sensation.
Right. He has to, and here's what he has to have the ability to comprehend on a human level the experiences of others.
Well,
that is different than experiencing
I think
yourself.
He has to understand how his art is going to be received by an audience before it even before that audience
that's
sees
what
it.
I've been saying.
Well, not really.
That's exactly what I've been saying.
No, because what you've been saying is that they believe that at some point it will find an audience. What I'm saying is, if given the opportunity to be in front of an audience, not necessarily an audience that likes it, you have to know how an audience would react. So the most extreme example of this is like shock value. Well, you know you're going to get a certain offended reaction or sort of impulsive response from audiences if you put something offensive in front.
Well, and that's a gimmick of common art if that's all you have.
You right, so, but I'm saying that then understand on a deeper level what your work is doing.
You're not taking into account what I said, that anyone who's a great artist is always novel. They're always new. It's something. It's an idiosyncratic phenomenon of the great artist. It is something that this person has that no one else has had and no one else will have. It's a novelty. Now, so the experiences of human life are common. Everyone has them to some degree. And so everyone can relate to someone saying, I've had this loss or something. The difference with the great artist is that he formulates the experience of the loss in a novel way. This is not something that anyone else could do. It's not simply giving the experience. It's comprehending the experience in a way that has not been expressed.
Yeah, and again, not caring how the audience receives that.
Well,
so what I've always said is that the artist, and I mean, I mostly work in film or am knowledgeable about film, so that's generally what I tend to talk about. The great director to me is someone who understands how their audience or some other people will receive their work and doesn't care. And I think there is a certain degree of admiration that audiences have towards watching something where they get the sensation that the artist really doesn't care whether they like it or not. There's a certain appeal to somebody who presents that level of confidence in their work, of comfort in the division that their work is creating, which I think most great artists initially are received with great divide in the people consuming their art. He understands that he's losing, siphoning off a section of his potential audience, and he's okay with that.
Yeah, but he still needs an audience, is my point.
Yeah, well, we'll leave it there. And so that's been our discussion on Inside Llewyn Davis. Fantastic movie. Explores the life of an artist. Worth watching. Coen Brothers do a great job. Next week, we'll be taking a look at David Cronenberg's Maps to the Stars. So don't miss out on that.